Hello, it's John Heaton and I'm going to review this album from Badfinger. Their first, the Magic Christian Music album from Badfinger to go along with the movie. Album came out in 1970 and I think the movie did as well, early 1970. So the history behind Badfinger, they had been called the Ivies and they'd been one of the first bands to be signed to the Beatles' Apple label. And they'd released an album called Maybe Tomorrow, but only in a few countries and not in the UK and not in the US, I don't think. And it hadn't done particularly well, despite great promise and despite some great songs which ended up appearing on here. So they decided to change the name from Ivies. Various people tried to think of a name. John Lennon came up with Prix, Prix, which got rejected. And then I think Badfinger was the working title to With a Little Help from My Friends when they were doing an instrumental version of that. They called it Badfinger Boogie. So maybe that's where it originated from. And then Mal Evans, who got involved with Badfinger, maybe suggested that name. I'm not sure. But so then the album came out and so this is Pete Ham, Mike Gibbons and Tommy Evans. Ron Griffiths is on this album playing guitar, but he'd left by the time the album came out and was replaced by Joey Molland on guitar and later vocals. So Pete Ham and Mike Gibbons from Swansea in Wales, and Ron Griffiths also Welsh, and then Tom Evans from Liverpool, and Joey Molland later from Liverpool. So I have two copies to show you, and this takes me back to the days I used to collect rare vinyl. So this is the US pressing on Apple. So you can kind of tell the US Apple from the UK Apple. It's a little bit lighter in colour. And interestingly enough, this album featured 12 tracks, whereas the UK version contained 14. And I'll talk to that in a little bit, because I'm going to show you my UK version, which is what's the word? When it's a shiny cover. It's in good condition, this one. So produced by Tony Visconti, the original Ivies album was, and there's a couple of this tracks left over, produced by him, and Mal Evans does the production duties on the rest. I'm not sure how qualified he was, and Jeff Emmerich in his book is saying that maybe he wasn't the right man to produce Badfinger, but I'm not sure who else was around. So this is on the UK Apple, and as I say, 14 tracks, so 2 tracks got dropped from the US version. A track called Give It a Try, which was written by Tom, Pete, Ron and Mike, so all 4 of them. And then a track called Angelique from Tom dropped. And actually, looking at it, maybe those 2 tracks are not very strong, so the album didn't really suffer without those tracks. This is the movie. If you haven't checked it out, it's a good, it's not absolutely fantastic, but it's a good period piece and some good humour and a lot of faces that you're going to recognise in this movie, apart from Peter Sellers and Ringo Starr in the lead roles. You've got cameos from Spike Milligan, John Cleese, Michael Aspel, Richard Attenborough, Roman Polanski, Raquel Welch and Christopher Lee. It's a hilarious sequence at the end when they're playing the song Come and Get It, and there's a swimming pool filled full of manure and urine and stuff, and they throw a whole lot of pound notes into this swimming pool, and all the bankers with their their bowler hats and suits dive into the pool to get the money, and the sentiment being everyone has their price, that people will do anything for money, basically. That's the sentiment running through the movie, some good moments, some good to see London in the 60s, really. Good scenes in, I think it's Hyde Park or maybe St James's Park, with Ringo as the tramp. And some wacky humour from Peter Sellers. And 3 tracks from Badfinger are featured on this album, on this film, which all appear on here. So the album's called Magic Christian Music because it goes with the film, but it kind of stands alone as an album pretty well, actually. And Come and Get It is the opener, which Paul McCartney had written for the band, and he'd gone into EMI and recorded a demo on his own with playing the drums and bass, piano, doing a guide vocal, and then gave it to the band and said, do it like this and you'll have a hit on your hands. So I think the band were a bit tempted to play around with it, but they stuck to Paul's instruction and did a perfect replica of that demo with Tommy Evans singing the lead, and it was a number 4 hit in early 1970, and you can see a version of it on Top of the Pops. So at this stage they were undecided as to who was going to be the lead vocalist, not that there ever really was a lead vocalist in Badfinger, but it's noticeable that Tom Evans is singing a lot more lead on this album than he was on later albums. And Pete Ham is somewhat in the background, not completely obviously. He's contributing a lot to this album. Some of his very best work is on this album, but he's not quite as dominant as he would become on No Dice and Straight Up. So that launched them to stardom, the Come and Get It single, and Crimson Ship is a song written by Tom and Pete with good harmonies. Badfinger are always masterful at harmonies. I'll say Beatlesque, because no shame in that. They were on the Apple label. They were mentored by Paul and later George. Mal Evans was involved, so very much within the Apple family. And they did this band, when they're at their best, sound like latter day Beatles. They're really that good. And Crimson Ship is not outstanding, but it's pretty good. Good guitar from Pete. Then Dear Angie from poor old Ron Griffiths, who was kicked out of the band before this album came out, but this is a great track, a lost gem from him. Good melody, and he's still alive and going strong. And Joey Molland, the only other surviving member of Badfinger. All the others have all passed on. So Dear Angie, good track. Fisherman from Tom. This is simplistic, and it's quite amusing to listen to a couple of times, but it's really not a great track. Tom has done far better than this. I don't know what he was thinking lyrically. But it's quite innocent, it's okay. But Midnight Sun is a better track. It's a rocker from Pete Ham, and he used to do this kind of song very well. It's kind of precursor to No Matter What, same style, and good guitar, good heavy guitar, and really good track. Beautiful in Blue. Now this is Tom Evans closer to his best. Just coming up with a sublime melody, as he would do throughout his career, really, and just beautifully sung. When Tom Evans is singing a ballad, it doesn't get much more beautiful than that. It really doesn't. And brilliant. Rock of All Ages is written by Tom, Pete and Mike, and is a storming rocker, and in the film. Paul McCartney laid down a piano track when they were in the studio doing this, but he said, no, you boys go into the studio and do it properly, which they did. So it's just a storming rocker with a great lead vocal from Tom Evans, and a good sequence in the film when this song is playing. Flipping over to side 2, you have another track from the movie, Carry On Till Tomorrow. Just a beautiful ballad written by Tom and Pete, and Tom Evans singing the lead vocal, but with some great harmony from Pete. This is one of their all-time classic ballads, and works very effectively in the park sequence in the movie. I'm in Love from Pete, not one of his stronger tracks, quite dismissible if I'm honest. Walk Out in the Rain, the opposite. This is up there with Pete Ham's best tracks, and this featured on the Ivies album, and is just Pete Ham at his melodic best, no less. Brilliant. Angelique from Tom, quite dismissible, I have to say. Knocking Down Our Home, again, another Pete Ham classic, about, you know, they're knocking down where we used to live, maybe in a block of flats, and how sad it is. But a lot of block of flats were getting knocked down at the end of the 60s because they couldn't really last. They were falling to pieces anyway, so they had to knock them down. And this song is quite evocative. Give it a try, written by all four of them. Not a very good track, if I'm honest. But the album finishes brilliantly with Maybe Tomorrow, which really should have been a hit single. I don't quite know why it wasn't when it was released on one of the earliest Apple singles. Tom Evans is on brilliant vocal form. It's a brilliant melody. And I just can't understand why it wasn't a hit. It's very 60s in feel, and lovely vocal from Tom with hearty harmony vocal from Pete in the chorus. You can really hear him on harmony vocal. So a good debut from Badfinger, and they were to go from strength to strength for the next couple of years after this. And but this is a solid debut. I recommend you check it out, whichever version you can find. It's available on CD. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.